Hey, this is Notser, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Tier 10 Pan-Asian light cruiser, Jinan. Now, this is made available through Early Access in 11.0. It is only made available after 8 chain missions with unique currency, and the currency is Pan-Asian tokens. And then once you have unlocked and spent money to get these Pan-Asian tokens, because you can't just play the game and get enough, then you have the privilege to spend 20,000 doubloons on this ship. Now, this is a first for World of Warships. With the German battlecruiser line, they did a test for offering the Tier 10 Schlieffen through Auction House, the in-game auction. People obviously decided that it was valuable, and they spent... And I think the average was like 22,000 doubloons. That was the cutoff of people. Anyone who spent more than that got the ship. Anyone below that didn't get it. So Wargaming chose basically exactly how much the average was, and they set it as the price, 20,000 doubloons. It's early access. For most people, do not spend a dime. This is not a ship that is devastating the enemy. This is not overpowered, not in the slightest. There is no hint of uber power associated with this line and even this ship. And the reason I say that is because it is basically a destroyer with a citadel. And we all know that that is a weaker DD. Because citadels are made to be punished, and everyone wants to punish you, and we exist in a very battleship-heavy meta. For obvious reasons. They just released a battleship line. People love the battleship. It's by far the most popular class in the game. So I was averaging 4 to 6 battleships every single game. And you do not like any battleship. Every battleship can overmatch pretty much all of your ship. There are extra armor along the side, but I have not experienced any slowdown of the destructive capability of the opposing battleships against this ship. I found that if I was ever spotted for 10, 15 seconds, maybe even 5 seconds, it all depends on where their positioning was, I was the #1 target. And a significant amount of time, I was one-shot, 100 to 0. It's tough. And, you know, the Jinan Tier 10, it would stand to reason that this ship is going to play against another Tier 10 that was just recently introduced in 11.0. The Incomparable, or Incomparable, that's also available, and it has so much overmatch, it laughs at this ship. So, yeah, you're going to face a lot of ships that see you as a loot pinata and want a free kill on you. So you have to play this ship and the line itself very, very specific. So, 127mm guns, Deepwater Torpedoes. In this example, I do have depth charges. You'll notice that they are not ranged depth charges, so you have to sail on top of your target. Probably going to use your guns more frequently to counter submarines that are near the surface than you'll ever get to use these depth charges. You have a unique smoke consumable, which Pan-Asian DDs have always had. You have defensive AA, which is available at Tier 6 and continues to be there the entire time. Torpedo reload booster, which is a very fascinating skill. And then to round it out, the Tier 9 and the Tier 10 get a minor heal. This is not anywhere close to the British light cruiser heal. So those of you who might be going, oh, well, you know, it has smoke, has a heal, it has torpedoes, has a small gun caliber. Is this a Pan-Asian British light cruiser? No, not in the slightest. This is very much in Atlanta, very much in Austin, but torpedo skewed. Now, in this example, obviously, we turned our AA on, and pretty good AA, right? Yeah. The AA is not the problem. Neither is sitting in smoke. The problem is when you are trying to AA and you are spotted. It is a logical expectation that you would associate this as an anti-aircraft carrier ship, But spotting is the bigger penalty than anything else, and that means you want to hide all the time. You never want to be seen. Anytime you are seen, there's always a possibility that some stray shot is going to come in. One of the reasons why I like incoming fire alert is I don't have to have direct line of sight to know that someone wants to shoot me. So it is a useful tool, and I did spec into it. I also have radiolocation, which I use on cruisers for hunting, DDs, submarines, battleships, whatever. It just gives you a little bit more information than you would normally have. The other skills that you may consider speccing into for this, I would definitely encourage you to get Superintendent. There is Torpedo Reload, Torpedo Damage. Both of those are good options for this because this is a torpedo-focused line. I have tried to play a gunboat so many times, I cannot make it work. I cannot make range, rate of fire, whatever the case may be. It is very challenging to go all in on guns. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a viable strategy available on this ship line. Now, in this game, you can obviously tell that we were playing with the islands. Any area that has a lot of islands that create very strong line-of-sight blockers, that is a wonderful place to play with the Pan-Asian Lights and Jinan, of course, being the Tier 10. It helps with so many issues that you might have. It covers up the time when you can't use smoke. It covers up direct line of sight, so maybe a battleship that is spawned and near their spawn. As long as you consider that, you can place yourself in such a way that the right type of targets won't be there to punish you. And you will, in fact, only have to deal with the lesser targets that are easier to deal with. You know, DDs and cruisers and submarines. But submarines obviously aren't available now. But they will eventually. We know that's the case, and this will work just fine against them if they are already spotted. Now, the astute observer might notice that we are missing a consumable that you might deem necessary for this type of play. There is no way to equip hydroacoustic. That is an option that is not made available to any Pan-Asian light cruiser in the main line. I don't know exactly on the premium, but I know that the main line itself has no way of equipping hydro, which is a very big deal for a smoking ship that is very vulnerable. It's wanting to sit in smoke. It wants to hide. It would seem to reason that that would then attract torpedoes, just as DD smoke does all the time. And that's one of the drawbacks that I've always noticed playing this, is it just sucks when it comes to avoiding torpedoes that could potentially end its life because it lacks hydro, because it stays in smoke a lot of times, or wants to. So you have to be very disciplined with your positioning. That is the key that makes this all go. Just barely moving around the map very cautiously to place yourself in the perfect position. As is in this example, the Pommern, he was using his hydro to detect us, but obviously it's not there anymore because we are within 6 kilometers. The original hydro that I wanted to bail out on, I sailed north, and then we came around, we assist with B, and then we came back around, and obviously the Pommern, he wants to be cautious. He doesn't know what the hell's going on, obviously. But one thing that you need to keep in mind, you can't fire inside of smoke if you are within 6 kilometers of a target, because it will bloom out and detect him. But you can sure send torpedoes and not be detected. And these torpedoes hurt. And if I wanted to be crazy, I could use Torpedo Reload Booster and instantly have them all back. You can Torpedo Reload Boost after sending all of your starboard and your port torpedoes and have all of them recharge again. So the possibilities to stop a flank as it's pushing into you is really appealing. And it's probably the main reason why they feel like they are offering something that is balanced, because these Deepwater Torpedoes, they do wreck, and they are the main tool. After playing through all of the different variations, the Deepwater Torpedoes are really what sets this apart, and what you should invest your time and understanding and positioning in, generally speaking. You generally want to be on the opposing flank when they're pushing, and you want to offer some way to slow it down. Obviously, I left the safety of smoke, knowing that, obviously smoke is going away, and of course we run right into an aircraft carrier. Now, thankfully, this is a Tier 8 aircraft carrier, so he's not going to actually do too much. But immediately spotted, obviously, because AA is on, and immediately taking damage. And if it was a more impressive ship, we would have taken a lot more damage. So it is a very, very, very vulnerable ship line. But, as you guys are probably aware, that's okay, as long as the tools that are available have value. And you know what? At the end of the day, there are 500 or so ships in the game. It's okay if a line is a little bit more situationally viable than, say, another line. Best example, I would say, is the German battlecruiser line is very effective. It works very well, and it's very popular, and for good reason. It's German, and it's a battlecruiser, and the design itself is very fun and rewarding. The Pan-Asian Light Cruiser line will not be viewed as fun and rewarding in the same way because it is so fragile and so vulnerable. But there is nothing quite like sending Deepwater Torpedoes on both flanks and having even more to send. And this is the best example. We had a Des Moines Sierra 117. Nice, he loves Halo. He was coming back. That was the initial Des Moines that I was dealing with earlier, and he, sailed away. Worked on the east side, crushed it so hard. But we activated our torpedoes, we activated our torpedo reload booster, and now we're filling the area to slow his progress down and obviously try and damage the GK. Team's doing a good job, though, on the GK, so I will probably not land my torpedoes before. And unfortunately, I think Sierra 117 is using hydroacoustic, so he can see these torpedoes as he's maneuvering. But look at how tiny we are, and look at this position. I have very carefully, I felt like I was going to run into the island, but very carefully navigated in such a way that kept the island in between my ship and the Des Moines, so he could not spot me to punish me. We got very lucky that I didn't have to break out the smoke screen, because there's just not enough smoke screen. There's like one too few consumables of smoke screen, even with Superintendent. So you've got to fight with yourself on, okay, is this a good time? Oh, can I just get a by with firing over islands? That's what you've got to really feel out by playing the line. But we safely moved away from the Des Moines, and now we have an enemy Massachusetts on approach. The torpedo reload booster is very effective, but it is, unfortunately, a 5-minute cooldown. So, in reality, you probably will never use every single torpedo reload booster, especially if you pick up the Superintendent skill. But I would not discourage equipping Superintendent, because it does help with smoke, it does help with your heal, and, it's nice to potentially have 3 torpedo reload. I mean, you could theoretically use it at the beginning, and then 5 minutes later, and then another 5 minutes. So you could theoretically use your torpedo reload with probably a minute or 2 to spare. So having enough is always a good thing, because it's a lot of torpedoes. And at the end of the game, most players have used up a lot of their consumables, so they are more vulnerable to something like a Deepwater Torpedo, whereas early on, they basically have Hydro, and Hydro works really well against Deepwater Torpedoes for obvious reasons. Deepwater Torpedoes are basically stealthy Japanese torpedoes that are very effective, but can only damage a certain amount of ship classes. But that's actually a really cool benefit, and it does encourage incorporating the torpedoes earlier than you would maybe have expected with maybe a traditional torpedo, because you can easily torpedo under your teammates through the opposing even, and you won't have them, accidentally slam into them and do team damage or anything like that. They will pass harmlessly underneath your friendly destroyers and go towards the true target. So, yeah, you've got a vulnerable light cruiser, and yeah, it's not the best gun systems. Yeah, it doesn't have hydroacoustic. But man, is it fun to use Deepwater Torpedoes on these giant battleship pushing meta that we've run into with the German battlecruiser. You know, played well, played effectively. This is just what the doctor ordered to deal with that problem, and it's really fun to have such a massive amount of torpedoes that don't really contribute to killing off your teammates. The Kitakame is one of those ships where it might have normal torpedoes, and it might have, you know, nearly the same amount of torpedoes, but those torpedoes are way less effective because of who you have to play around. This is a ship that is terrified. Oh, and by the way, we're within 6 kilometers of the Massachusetts, so of course he's going to be in range to detect us. So I'm just trying to hide myself before, and obviously set as many fires as possible. It's a good fire starter because of the amount of guns if you locate your shells well. They are slow because they are American, but that does enable you to fire over islands very effectively. But these torpedoes work really well with DDs, which they work really well with you because the things that you're most vulnerable to, spotting, big guns. DDs are great at spotting. Aircraft carriers are great at spotting you. Battleships are great at delivering big guns. Even supercruisers or heavy cruisers have big guns. So you've got a lot of targets that want to pick on you, and it's really only enabled by these guys right here. Once these guys are dead or not on your flank, it's much easier for you to be this superior concealed ship. Go on the map, sail around, and try and counter any battleships that may exist, and it works really effectively once that issue is dealt with. But at early game onset, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. Initially, I was sailing towards an objective and getting in range to use my guns and getting in range to use my torpedoes and bumping into, of course, the unspotted DD, and then every battleship, cruiser gun on the planet shoots at you and kills you in about 30 seconds. Otherwise, you use smoke, and then you're a torpedo magnet for all of those DDs that just move forward. You see how this works out very poorly for you. That is clearly not the strategy. You don't just blindly go towards the nearest objective and try and get in range to use your guns and torpedoes. You have to cautiously approach with backup, with teammates in front of you, beside you, and you need to try and place yourself so that you have an escape. Only then can you effectively be the platform that they probably envisioned. But it does require a lot of prep work, and you know, obviously the Jinan in this game, we did an absolute great effort in this one. The AA is, of course, very strong. It is a Tier 8 aircraft carrier, admittedly. So, you know, aircraft carriers are not really an issue with this ship. It's narrow, it has great AA, has defensive AA, has smoke. It has pretty much everything it could possibly ask for to deal with aircraft carriers. But aircraft carriers are obviously not the only target. And that's why I strongly encourage you to be cautious when approaching objectives early on when there's not enough spotting information. But of course, once spotting information is obtained, you can really do whatever you want. You can fire from behind an island, inside of smoke, you can hold fire completely and use your torpedoes exclusively. There's a lot of overlap to destroyer gameplay, torpedo destroyer gameplay, like the Shimakaze or the Holland. You know, you've got a lot of options here, and it's unique flavor for the cruiser line, because they just don't find this very frequently. And I think the Deepwater Torpedo works really well to keep this more relevant than the Kitakami. So, very excited by this line. Hopefully you guys enjoyed seeing the Jinan in action. I'm going to showcase the Tier 9 tomorrow, and we'll talk about, you know, strategy with that and the gameplay itself. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.